Hi, I'm Nadia Verrelli, your federal NDP candidate for Sudbury. Most of you have met me and know me, my background. Grew up with a working class Italian family, worked all my life. I think I started around 14. And this was to help pay for tuition and to pay my way to school. And I successfully received my PhD in 2007 when I started working in various universities in the North, landed here in Sudbury, teaching Canadian politics, teaching, researching, and publishing on Canadian politics for the past, I would say, about 15 years. With regards to my position at Sudbury, I was part of the political science department, and it was one of the programs that were cut, resulting in me losing my job. I've always been committed to NDP values and NDP platform. So for me, running as the NDP candidate was a natural fit. It was something that I've been considering for the past year and a half, and here we are.
All right, well, thank you. And thanks as well for keeping on time. I don't know if you were present for the David's presentation, but we're going to follow a very similar format where we have a number of policy related questions. And then we're also going to have the same audience questions that we received. So just like last time, we're looking at the first question has to do with C12. And I won't repeat that for our audience, so we can jump right ahead to the question that we're posing to you around that bill. And that is, you want to advance to the next slide, David, please? I think there's three questions around that particular policy. So one is just like previously, defend how your party voted on that bill. How would you personally have voted? And then if you could outline a few ways that you could perhaps make the policy better.
Okay, sure, and thank you for this question. So I have a prepared statement that I would like to premise all the answers with regards to the specific ones that were asked. So first, the New Democrats have consistently championed key environmental legislation, strengthening it along the way, where Liberal sponsors or cabinet ministers have left these bills open to avoid real accountability to Canadians. Jack Layton, as we know, brought the first climate change legislation to and through the House of Commons. The Climate Change Accountability Act was years ahead of any real climate action championed by any of the parties that we're listening to tonight. It would have enshrined in law the targets identified by the US and the EU. But what we saw is that this bill, it failed in the Senate. Since then, we know that leaders like Megan Leslie, who's now the executive director of World Wildlife Fund Canada, and Lyndon Duncan and Nathan Collins, and Lauren Collins, our most recent environment and climate change critic, have all fought hard to get the Liberals and the Conservatives to real action on climate. They have brought bills on climate action, restricting tanker traffic, restoring protection to inland waterways, and in 2019 proposed a federal environmental bill of rights. So New Democrats have taken the lead on the environment, but specifically to C12, as we know, this was the Liberal government's attempt to provide some actual accountability to their climate action plan after opposing any accountability for so long. Now, the climate crisis remains an urgent priority and an existential threat. It calls on all of us to be courageous, to act decisively, and to be accountable. Future generations are counting on us. Our NDP MPs used every level we could to reach to ensure Canadians finally get a climate accountability law that is able to hold government and future governments to account for the climate commitments they make. To their credit, Minister Wilkinson and his team welcomed our feedback and engaged in good faith towards making C12 better for Canadians. Canadians are clear. They are tired of government setting long-term emission reduction targets without any intention of meeting them and without mechanisms to hold them accountable when they are off track. That is why we welcome the government's Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act and committed ourselves to working collaboratively with all parties to address all flaws or any flaws within the bill, as those in the environmental community and civil society have urged us to do. The most significant shortcoming of Bill C-12 has been its lack of near-term accountability measures on the path to 2030. That is why during the clause-by-clause committee, the NDP will be proposing amendments that the government has agreed to support that will put in place a 2026 interim emissions objective, as well as progress reports in 2023 and 2025. We have also jointly agreed to a number of other amendments, like making the advisory body more independent, reviewing the 2030 targets in 2025, and enshrining the role of Indigenous knowledge. From the beginning, our objective was to ensure that Bill C-12 provides more than just empty words. With these amendments in place, the New Democrats feel the bill can now play a meaningful role in providing the accountability measures Canadians deserve. In order to avoid this bill suffering the same fate as Jack Layton's bill, we will work in good faith to ensure the bill is sent to the Senate before the end of the session.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's go ahead then to our next question around policy. So here we're looking at C15, and this is the same set of 3 questions related to this one. If we want to just go ahead and jump to the next slide. And so again, it's about how you voted, or pardon me, how you would have voted, and how your party voted, and how you could possibly make the bill better.
So as we know, C15 is a rework of Bill 232, sponsored by former NDP MP Romeo Seganash from Northern Quebec. Romeo's bill was approved by the House, but senators did delay the vote on the bill so long that it died when the Liberals' first mandate came to an end. We support following UNDRIP, and yes, we will continue to support real reconciliation. And our plan goes further in our support of reconciliation. We have our plan laid out on what reconciliation means for us. So we believe and we will advance self-determination. We are committed to working with Indigenous communities where we will co-develop a national action plan for reconciliation. The goal is to ensure that Canada's laws, policies, and practices are consistent with Canada's Human Rights Commission commitments, including UNDRIP, and also including land rights, cultural rights, and right to self-determination and self-government. We will also continue to respect and recognize treaties, including Inuit right to self-determination. In our commitment to true reconciliation, we understand that this begins by acknowledging Canada's colonial history of genocide and stolen lands. Further to that, in addition to the recognition of self-determination, we also recognize self-determination of Métis, and will pursue government-to-government, nation-to-nation negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. We'll go to our third.
Sorry, I'm like rushing a bit. Like it's been like, I'm in and out of canvassing, and that's why I rushed into the meeting a little later than I had hoped to. So I do apologize, and I will breathe and try and speak slower.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you a check. I mean, there's we have about another 14 minutes or so, okay. And there are those 2 really interesting audience questions coming up. So we'll just go ahead and jump to this next policy question then on Bill C-230, the National Strategy to Redress Environmental Racism Act. And if we go ahead to the question slide, we'll see that there's the same 3 questions regarding that particular policy there that we'd like to hear from you, please.
Thank you. So as we know, C-230 would require the federal government to collect data on links between environmental hazards, race, socioeconomic status, health, and compel the Environment and Climate Change Minister to develop a national strategy to address the harms caused by environmental racism. Now, my position is that we know that climate change and other environmental degradation does not affect everyone equally and evenly. People that can't afford it can protect themselves and their families from the impact of climate change and the poisoning of earth, air, and water. Indigenous and racialized Canadians are more likely to feel the effects. One only needs to look north to communities like Tuktoyaktuk, where permafrost thaw regularly threatens homes, roads, and important cultural sites, as well as marine and coastal environments. This is having a profound effect on Northern and Indigenous traditions, especially for those who rely on the land, sea, and ice for their livelihood, and is environmental racism in action. Bill C-230 intends to help us quantify this impact across Canada. New Democrats supported this bill at second reading and improved it during committee hearings to give it teeth that the Liberal sponsor failed to do. We called for the collection of data on links between race and environmental hazards by changing the word may to must to ensure data collection takes place. And we know the importance of words. Changing it from may to must compels the government to collect the data that we need to address this in any meaningful way. The bill was also changed to include environmental justice and is now renamed a national strategy respecting environmental racism and environmental justice, with text amended to include the promotion of efforts across Canada to advance environmental justice and to assess, prevent, and address environmental racism. We would have voted in favor of this bill when it came up for third reading, but as you know, Justin Trudeau called this election, which meant the bill died at the table. I look forward to supporting this bill enthusiastically in the next House of Commons.
Thank you. So the next set of questions then allow you an opportunity to talk about your party's policies, environmental policies, climate policies, and highlight particular aspects that you would continue to champion, improve, or create. What are some of the impacts of your policy that you anticipate? What kind of expert advice and evidence would support your policy? And will it encourage our global neighbors to cut their emissions too?
Okay, thank you. So I actually have three that I'd like to talk about. The first two briefly, the third one, because it is near and dear to my heart, I would like to spend a bit more time on that. So in not necessarily in order of priority, but maybe. So the first is to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. When we send money directly to oil and gas production, and we see this, that the Liberals are directly supplanting any action that they say they are taking against the climate. Yes, we will need to support Canadians to move into better, greener jobs. If we turn the $18 billion in subsidies we've provided to big oil to the transition we need to make in the sector, we could build entirely new industry, moving the Canadian economy away from dependence on oil sands extraction and shipping unrefined bitumen out of the country. It won't be easy, I understand that, but if we keep subsidizing fossil fuel industry, it will never change. The fossil fuel sector, as we know, is directly responsible for 1 part in 6 of our total GHG emissions, or roughly 100 megatons. And the use of fossil fuels across our sectors accounts for another 3 in 6. This is the heart of the problem, and we can only fix it if we stop incentivizing the fossil fuel industry. And so New Democrats will end fossil fuel subsidies. On the second one that it is connected to that, we're moving towards an electrified economy, so electrification. We need to move personal and commercial transportation, home heating, commercial processes, and many industrial processes as possible to electrify and away from fossil fuels. These represent the major share of total burning of fossil fuels, and we have now, or will have soon, technology to replace almost all of these processes with electrified options. We only have to look to the mining sector, which is moving so quickly towards electrified systems to show us that it is possible. And we know that Sudbury is well poised and well positioned to bring us there and to export our technology outside of Canada. This, combined with green and a clean energy generation, we can reduce our GHGs by 250 MT by electrifying. And then also connected to this, I've always believed when addressing climate change, it starts at home. We know the importance of eating local and how that is better for health, our local economy, the community, and the environment. Just a few weeks ago, I visited the Flour Mill Community Farm and was happy to see the hard work and dedication of the youth in the community. They were there learning how to garden, the importance of eating fresh and local, and helping to feed their community. My partner and I shop frequently at the Sudbury Farmers Market, and we were over the moon happy when the winter market was started and it's continuing. We are very grateful to the hard work that was put in to making this happening, to make this happen and to continue it. Youth, local farmers, they all know the importance of a food system that is local and low to no carbon. These are food systems that need to continue. These are food systems that the NDP and I support completely. So we're committed to working together with farmers and with food producers to develop a national food policy, making our food system stronger all across the country and making it greener. We'll also work to put in place a food waste strategy to reduce the huge amount of food that currently goes to waste in Canada. Further, the NDP will support and does support Indigenous food sovereignty, working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities to expand access to healthy food, including traditional and country food. Working together with Northern communities, we're committed to reforming the Nutrition North program to improve food security for Northern families. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation. And we're going to shift then to the two audience questions. And so the first one, as before, was looking at the green space around Laurentian University and also looking at the Wolf Lake Red Pine Forest. So the question related to those two topics is, will you commit to protecting those green spaces, and what actions could you take to do so?
So I'm on record of saying this in the past, and I will do so again. The LU green spaces are very special and important to me. I use them often daily, and it weighs heavily on my heart that they're being considered. They shouldn't be monetized. They should remain. But on that, we are committed to the LU green space. Do it as the candidate for the NDP, do it as your MP, but do it also as a fellow Sudburian citizen. Further, the NDP is committed to the protection of our land and our water, safeguarding our outdoors to ensure better quality of life for all Sudburians and all Canadians. This includes enshrining in law an environmental bill of rights, protecting 30% of our land, fresh water, and oceans by 2030. We will do so by working together, putting into action the United Nations declarations on the right of Indigenous peoples, as we've talked about, in our collective fight against the climate crisis. We will create an Office of Environmental Justice to address the impacts of pollution and loss of biodiversity on low-income, racialized and marginalized communities. We also recognize that as original peoples of the country, Indigenous peoples have intimate connections to their homelands, territories, and resources, and have provided stewardship since time out of memory. It is within that context that the NDP would approach the question of preservation of Wolf Lake Forest Reserve and old growth red pine forest, plant and animal species, and waterways contained within it. As the guardians of the land, we will work with Indigenous peoples on this specific proposal. Ancient old growth forests and watersheds are critical to the region's biodiversity and important to our ongoing efforts to climate change. The Wolf Lake Forest Reserve is a unique resource of ongoing and vital importance to the ecological, financial, and cultural well-being of the region. The NDP is committed to working with local partners on recognizing and protecting Wolf Lake Forest in regulation and in legislation.
Okay, so I can only give you about a minute or so.
Oh shoot, I'll be quick.
So the last question, if you could just highlight a couple of things you might do. Here we are in the economic recovery phase from the COVID-19 pandemic. could you maybe list 2 or 3 things you might help to help small businesses to recoup?
So the NDP is committed in investing in people, and this means investing in small businesses. We know our record in extending and getting small business subsidies. This will continue because we know the path to recovery is working with workers and small businesses to rebuild our economy. But listing quickly, we will strengthen and modernize the Investment Canada Act. We will scrap the Invest in Canadian agency and create iCanada. And with our Canadian food strategy, which I talked a bit about, we will address regional needs and priorities by investing in our agriculture and our community needs.
Wow, nicely done. You really kept that one on time. Well, okay,
Sorry
thank you,
about
Nadia.
that. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, thanks for joining us this evening, and we will close off that session. So thank you,
thank
Nadia.
you, and thank you for everyone for the invitation.